So, sports cards is very similar to stocks. Compare a player and a company. If if Google's performing well and they have, their balance sheet is strong, their stock is going to go up. Same thing with a player. If a player is performing strong, his stock is going to go up. So just like in stocks, it's healthy to diversify your portfolio.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Steve here, Raiken Profit over at RaikenProfit.com. Here joined with Eric, who has been buying and selling baseball, basketball, and football cards for over 3 years now. And how much have you done in sales over these last 3-4 years?
In the past 3 years, I've been able to do a little bit over $1 million in sales from all the sports cards I've sold.
That's crazy. And you actually learned from a mentor of yours. I forget, what was your buddy's name in New Jersey?
His name is Dylan.
Dylan. So you learned from this guy, Dylan, back when you were, what, 18 years old?
He's 17, I believe, to be exact.
Did you ever think that you were going to have this success, man, doing over $1 million in sales trading cards?
No, and it's not really all me. It's a lot of sports cards just getting bigger. I spoke about this in another video with, marketing being pushed overseas and the legalization of gambling. So just sports cards just getting huge, and, I'm happy to be here, man, because of it.
Yeah, well, pumped to have you here. And in this video, we're going to essentially walk you through, step by step, how to invest in sports cards in 2020 and moving forward, right? Things are always changing and whatnot, but we're really going to be covering the up-to-date information. If you're just, starting to watch the Raiken Profit YouTube channel, or maybe you're in our free workshop, if you haven't joined it, it's a whole bunch of free buying and selling cards advice. It's a workshop, RaikenProfit.com/cards. Join that. We have tons of videos, how to grade cards. I'm gonna show you guys real quick. We have literally how to grade cards. We have how to find high profit sports cards. We have tips for buying and selling raw sports cards. We have so many videos in this workshop, so join it. You're gonna wanna join it. But step by step, how to get into buying and selling cards if you have no idea what you're doing. If you have zero experience, if you've never bought and sold a card before, that's what we're gonna be covering. So number one, Eric, let's discuss when someone's getting into this business, the first thing you gotta do is you gotta kind of pick a sport. Hockey, basketball, soccer, baseball, football. Like, how does somebody choose a sport to get into? And what's your mindset? Because you do baseball, basketball, football. So let's kind of cover how to choose that sport for a brand new beginner getting into this game.
For sure. So first off, the reason I do basketball, baseball, and football is just because those are the sports where there's the biggest market. But when I was first getting into sports cards, the cards I was mainly buying was football. Football was the sport I was the most passionate about, I knew about, and I felt the most comfortable putting my money into the sport that I watched the most. So football is the sport I was the most knowledgeable in 2015 when I first got started. But pick any sport, baseball, basketball, soccer, it doesn't matter. Just don't pick the sport you know the most about.
So pick the one you know most about and you're most passionate about, because if you don't, you do, how do I say this? You do want to spend time researching, knowing what's going on, keeping up to date, because if a player's starting to pick up speed, or their batting average is really increasing, or they're leading the league in home runs, and maybe it's like their first or second year, you probably want to start investing in that player a little bit more. So obviously being passionate about a sport is going to help. But would you say that football, baseball, basketball, soccer, hockey, is there a sport that's like the easiest to get into? Because maybe for someone like myself, I don't really watch a lot of sports, and maybe people who are watching, Eric, they don't watch a lot of sports. Maybe they're not even passionate about sports. Question number one, can they still get into this game? And question number two, is there a sport that's like the easiest to break into, where it's like the least amount of risk? Does that make any sense?
It makes sense. So if you don't watch much sports, I would suggest going to basketball. Basketball is, there's primetime games like 3 times a week on ESPN. Basketball has the biggest market, so it's the easiest to sell and buy stuff. I talk about it all the time. It's a combination of America and overseas, like somebody like LeBron James, for example. Let's compare LeBron James and Tom Brady. Tom Brady is a celebrity in the United States. Everybody in the US knows him. However, LeBron James is a global icon. With Nike, people are wearing his sneakers in China, all over Asia and Europe. So it's very different between the sports, and basketball really takes it to the next level in terms of globalization. So I would suggest starting with basketball because it's the most amount of decent cards you could buy, and it has the biggest market.
All right, so let's just say we're going to get into basketball, Eric. That's the sport. Check that off. Now, become familiar with the sport. So what advice, literally give me advice right now. for someone who doesn't do this at all? I'm going to get into buying and selling basketball cards. Okay, I'm not passionate about anything, but let's pretend maybe I am. I choose basketball. When you say let's get familiar with the sport, does that mean like studying the stats on ESPN? Does that mean watching the videos? Does that mean hanging out in the forums? How do I become familiar with the sport before starting to invest?
So less stats. You definitely do want to look at stats, but it's less stats and more just watching games, putting on ESPN, seeing who ESPN talks about a lot, seeing who's on the news, because these guys that are on the news and talk about a lot, you know, like I always say, this is a business built on hype and, you know, marketability, and, you know, these players that are being talked about the most probably sell for decent in the sports card world. So just watching games and just familiarizing yourself with everything about the sport is my best way to answer that question.
Awesome. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to start to learn about the successful players. So obviously when you're buying and selling sports cards, you're buying cards, but you're buying players. So again, you want to pick your sport, you want to get familiar with it, and ultimately you're doing that for a couple different reasons, right? Reason number one is you want to figure out who's successful, you want to figure out who's undervalued, you want to figure out who you feel maybe has a bright future. So how do you start to really define who's successful? I know we're going to be watching the games, listening to who the commentators are talking about, who's popping up on the newspapers and are in the blogs, but like, how do you really know who's successful?
So doing your background research on successful players gives you a good indication of what you should do now. So I'll give you guys an example. So someone like Giannis, right? Giannis's rookie card was in 2013. His National Treasures rookie card sells for $50,000, $60,000 plus now. And you have to look at it. Now, why does he sell for so much money? Not only is he a good player, he's very marketable, he wins, he hasn't won a championship yet, but he wins, and he's made an impact and a dent in the NBA. Same thing with LeBron James, which is why his rookie card autographs sell for $20,000, $30,000. Like, you have to look at players that can make us impact. Like, good examples, I'll get into it later, like, you know, people changing the game with like Luka Doncic with his, you know, all his sweet skills, and, you know, he's slow, but he's very, very good at what he does, and, you know, he can shoot the three ball like crazy. So you kind of want to look at players that can make a real impact in the game is my best way to put that. And looking at successful players in the past that have done that will give you a good indication of maybe who could do it now.
When did LeBron come into the league?
His rookie year was 2003.
2003, and he came right out of high school, I think.
He came right out of high school, yeah.
I remember when like there was all this hype. Remember people were talking about him and stuff. What could you have gotten an autograph for like those first couple of years?
Oh man, they were, I believe when Exquisite came out, so Exquisite is his best product, it was retailing for maybe not what it is today, maybe like $1,000. Very cheap. I mean, it is expensive, but for what it's worth now, it's not. And yeah, like LeBron James, his rookie year in 2003, I've never seen a prospect with as much hype until modern day 2019, or it's 2020 now, but 2019 was when Zion Williamson came in the league. They're actually kind of comparable in terms of hype. I've never seen anybody with as much hype as Zion Williamson except for LeBron James.
I hear a lot of people, and even in your group, because Eric has mentorship and coaching, which if you join the free workshop, it's somewhere over here, we talk a little bit about that. But there's a lot of people in your group buying that player and whatnot. And I know you said you were buying him as well. What are your thoughts on that play right now?
So Zion Williamson, I'm usually not the person to buy into the hype, but I am buying into the hype. And Zion Williamson, the only thing is if he stays healthy. If he stays healthy, his athleticism, the way he plays the game, the passion he has, his personality, people love him. Like, I believe when this whole quarantine thing happened, he actually paid for all the employees in the New Orleans Pelicans arena and paid their salaries over the next month.
What?
So everybody he's 19 years old too, which is crazy. So as long as he doesn't get hurt, he only has room to grow. He could get better at dribbling. He could get a bit better shot. And just his sheer athleticism at the moment and how much people love him really gives him a super high ceiling.
What's an example of one of his cards, what they go for?
So like his silver prism is a PSA 10. Sells for about, at this moment where we're talking in April of 2020, it sells for about $3,000.
Wow.
And you know, something like a silver prism, there's thousands of these printed. There's probably a couple hundred PSA 10s, but just to give you an example, like Giannis, I talk about him, his silver prism PSA 10 sells for about anywhere from the $15,000 to $20,000 ballpark. And then someone like Luka Doncic. So Luka Doncic, you know, is established in the league. He's already been in the league for almost 2 years now. He's very good. And his rookie card, his silver prism actually sells for about half of Zion because it's just all about hype. And Zion has way more hype, and people see with his athleticism, he could go down as one of the greatest players of all time, potentially maybe the greatest if he's able to get 5 or 6 rings.
That's crazy. That $3,000 card you mentioned, let's say he got injured and like messed up his Achilles heel or something like that. Ooh. What would happen to that?
Achilles heel? I think it would drop in half overnight, to be honest.
So that's why you got to stay up to date with what's going on. Yep. All right, let's get into the next step in terms of investing in sports cards if you're a complete beginner. So you've chosen a sport, right? Hopefully something you're passionate about. If you're not passionate about anything, Eric recommends basketball. You've chosen some players, you've done some research on who people are talking about, what are the blogs talking about, what's going on in the games, who are people excited about. Do you recommend choosing a few players, or would you say like more or less going with like the shotgun approach where you choose like maybe I have $1,000 I want to spend, or say I have $5,000 or whatever. Do I choose 20 players to invest in, or is it better to go kind of like dial in on 3 different players?
So, sports cards is very similar to stocks. Compare a player and a company. If Google's performing well and they have, their balance sheet is strong, their stock is going to go up. Same thing with a player. If a player is performing strong, his stock is going to go up. So just like in stocks, it's healthy to diversify your portfolio. Unless, I like to gamble, I like to take bigger risks. When I invest in a player, I like to kind of go all in. But that's just me. If you can't afford to take such a loss, or you're just more on the conservative side, diversify your portfolio. Pick a couple players that you could see, making an impact in the game and having a strong season. That's my best answer to that question.
Awesome. And there's different ways that you can diversify risk. Like you can choose players just like stocks. Like for example, Google's been around for a long time. They're probably going to do well. They're not going to go anywhere, but there's probably not like a huge upside because like they've grown so much already, but it's more safe. It's safe to put your money there. It's the same thing with players, I'm assuming. There's players who have been around for a while.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to, the value is going to stay. They're going to probably slowly keep increasing, I don't know. Regardless, but there's also players for people or players that have room for improvement, who are maybe rookies or they've had a couple good year. So what are your thoughts in terms of choosing players that have room for improvement? Is this something that you actively, have your students get into, or is this something that more like experts would want to invest in?
So now there's players so Google is kind of like LeBron James. Investing in LeBron James, he's only, maybe the next week his cards might sell a little lower than they did the previous week, but over time it's only going to go up, just like Google. And there's other players like that as well. So like, more retired players I like to invest in. Like I think Dwayne Wade, we're in Miami, but I think Dwayne Wade is a good investment. I think his prices are not as what they should reflect. Dwayne Wade's like a top 25 player of all time, in my opinion. So some people like that, putting money in Kobe Bryant is never going to go wrong. It's liquid. It's always going to go up. And there's all sorts of players. Wilt Chamberlain rookies from way back then. Then there's players that are more risky, that are 21, 22, 23 years old, that, are more like startup companies. They're very volatile. The Trae Youngs of the world. Luka Doncic less because he's kind of establishing himself. There's DeAndre Ayton. There's all sorts of young rookies that, are volatile. They're basically startup companies. So it's very similar to the stock game and how it works with volatility.
Yeah, and a lot of times people like to get into a stock when it's already up 80% in 3 weeks, right? And I think a good example of that right now is like the LeBrons, right? Haven't they jacked up a ton recently?
Yeah, but that's also in part to Gary Vee. So obviously Gary Vee has a very big following, and he was promoting, I'm investing in LeBron James, and a lot of people went on eBay and just started buying LeBron James. Simple, supply and demand, the price is going to go up.
But would you say that right here, where is it? Oh yeah, don't choose players that equate to being late to the party. Like, don't get into a card that's already like, how do I say this? Like, how do you know when you're late to the party? How do you know, like, what advice would you give to people who are like, they're buying these cards because they've gone up so much? That's why I was
I'll give you a perfect example. So you want to buy the card before the big spike. There's always a big spike that happens. You want to be there before it happens. So Patrick Mahomes, that big spike's happened already. Jason Tatum had a very good rookie year, went up. Then he had a bad sophomore year, went down, and then the spike happened. Boom, he went up this year.
What'd that spike look like?
So I think Jason Tatum's like silver PSA 10s were selling for about $250, $300 before the season, and after the season, I think it also did in large part that Kemba Walker was injured for a little bit. He went up to his silver PSA 10s about $900 now.
Gosh.
Yeah, so you want to be there before that big spike. So guys like, I love Trae Young. Trae Young, that spike has not happened yet. Other guys like Luka Doncic, it happened. Ja Morant, it hasn't happened yet. He's very young. But, if he comes out next year swinging 30 points a game, it's going to double in value. So before that big spike.
Got it. And also, you want to make sure that the players that you invest in, the hype isn't already dead. Now, you might be thinking hype, Steve. Eric, come on, hype. Hype doesn't really matter. According to you, hype is everything in this game. Hype is so important. So how do you know when that hype is gone? Like, people aren't talking about him anymore. You don't see him on the newspapers. You don't see the blogs. You don't see people talking about him in the games as much. Is that like, what is the definition of hype?
So the way I like to look at this question is, if you have a player that has gone up steadily and something's happened where he went down a lot. So let me give you an example, like Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz, he could go up in the future. He could come out next year and win a Super Bowl, and his value will skyrocket. But I like to stay away from those people, because someone like that, he had a very good campaign going, and then he started getting hurt a lot, and the hype died. Just like Jared Goff, he had not the best season this past year. His hype died. Even so, I'll give you a contradict to what I just said. And Jason Tatum, he had a pretty good rookie year. He was going up, and then his sophomore year, he played like crap, and his hype died. I would never invest in Jason Tatum. Now I would, because I see how tremendous he is, but that's just that's an example of, I'm not always right. But someone like Jason Tatum, that hype died for a period of time. You want to ride the hype train. You don't want to be off the hype train.
Got it. Awesome. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to smash that like button down below. Leave a comment if you have any questions for myself or Eric. Leave a comment down below. We're going to be reviewing them all. If you guys enjoy this content, subscribe. Also be sure to check out RaikenProfit.com/cards, because we have a free workshop. We have I think I showed you guys before. We have literally tons of videos that we're recording in this workshop. They're all free. Just put your name and email in. And if you want to learn about how you can work with Eric one-on-one, how you get mentorship from him, group coaching, if you want to learn how to buy and sell cards, and this guy, again, he's living it. He's doing it. I mean, show him all these cards you got over here, Will. You got a whole box. Pull out one random one.
I'll pull out one random one. Here's a random one. A Trae Young Prism Blue.
Ooh. What's that thing worth?
It's worth about $1,600 at the moment.
Oh my God, what'd you pay for it?
I paid $1,100.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
If you want to learn to buy and sell cards, get in the free workshop. We're also going to give some discounts if you do want to get in his program. I think I'm giving away like $100 off of his mentorship program and coaching. So join the free workshop. I'll give you details in there. But with that being said, any final words?
Yeah, join my program. I love to teach it. I'm very passionate about this stuff, as you can tell. You get full live support. I love doing it. Sports cards is a great thing to be in, and it's just the beginning.
Awesome. So with that being said, go out there, make it happen. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.